Hey everyone, this is Ashley with CT Marina Digitals. I'm going to do a tutorial to show how to use my new texture overlay pack in Photoshop. I already have open my images that I want to use, and I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I wanted to do one that was a little closer up. These ones tend to be a little bit easier, and then one with a full body image. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my image, and I'm going to go to the quick selection tool and select subject up at the top. And if you want to zoom in, use your plus and minus selection to select and deselect parts of the image if it didn't get it all that well the first time. It's not too much of an issue if it doesn't do it perfect, because we can always go back and correct it. And then after you do that, you can duplicate your background layer, create a layer mask, and then press Control or Command I on your keyboard to invert your layer. You can either navigate through your folder by going up to File and Place Embedded and searching for your file. You will have to raster size your layer to work with it doing certain things if you do it that way, so it is easier just to have your file already open, select all, edit and copy, and then edit and paste above your image, and resize if you need to. My files are the same size, so I don't need to resize. And I'm going to click on my overlay layer. I can either hold down the Alt key and click between these layers to create a clipping mask, or I can right click my overlay layer and click on Create Clipping Mask. This one honestly is going to be super easy. It's a lot easier when you don't have to blend so much with like their feet and shadows and stuff. But you still do have to clean up your edges and everything like that. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And as you can see, there's certain parts of this where I need to correct where the selection was. So I'm just going to make sure that my layer mask is selected over here. I'm going to use my white brush at 100% opacity to brush the layer on where I want to, and black to brush off where I want. So I'm going to go on black right now because I want to brush it off of that part of her arm and her shirt. And then I want to brush it on. You can also press X on your keyboard. That switches between your black and your white color there, your brush. And now I would go around the whole outside of the image and do this. Like you can see there's a little bit of a line here because she was on a lighter backdrop. It's obviously easiest if you do it on the same color backdrop that you're trying to work with, but that's not always possible, and I understand that people want to use digitals after for a photo that they've already taken. So I would go around the whole image and I would clean up all of the edges. Sometimes you can get away with, after you flatten your layer, you can blur the very edge of their body, and that will take away those fine lines. But that is not always the case, and I believe that she was selected pretty good other than that. So, sunglasses. Now I could like change or brush this off a little bit in here at like a low opacity to make it match the backdrop a little bit better, but her glass shades are brown, so it's really not going to make that much of a difference to make it look realistic. Now in the initial image she was standing pretty far away from the backdrop, plus with this digital there's depth created with how much the leaves in the back are blurred, so that would mean that she's not standing like close to a backdrop, so we wouldn't even need to add shadows behind her on this or anything. But this leaf is pretty in focus, and in the photo she would be standing in front of it, so I am going to click on my overlay and add a bit of blur. I'm going to go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I don't want to add a ton, I just want to add enough to make it known that she is standing in front of that leaf that's mostly in focus. Press OK and zoom out. I'm going to go and flatten and show you what I was talking about here. this fine line right here. Sometimes if you just take your blur tool at 100% opacity and just do the very edge of your subject, it completely gets rid of that. Plus, when you have such a depth of field, you're working with such a depth of field behind your subject, you might want to do this anyways, just so they don't look like they're copy and pasted into your backdrop, and it makes them blend a lot better. Get rid of all the sharp edges on there. So I would go around the entire image and do that around all of that too. So before and after. I had my image smaller. Let's see if I can, there we go, before, after. Okay, so now for this one's going to be a little bit harder. This is where you can start using blending modes, or you can leave it on normal mode and you can mess around with darkening the overlay, whatever you want. So I'm going to go over, and it doesn't really matter if I grab the overlay first or not. I'm just going to grab it real quick, select all, edit and copy. But before I paste, I'm going to go over to my quick selection tool and select subject. Okay, and now this one's going to be a little bit trickier too, because we're working with dark on dark shadows. Obviously I want that selected. The flowers are going to be something that we're going to have to work with and work around. I do have people message me sometimes and ask about gowns that I edit in my photos. I'm just going to leave that there for now. I often use AI models because when people in different countries steal my overlays in my work, it's not including a bunch of my clients anymore. Okay, so this gown is not real. I don't typically select the hair. I leave that up to quick selection because quick selection, the select subject tool, does a pretty good job at grabbing those flyaways. It may not look like it when you do the quick selection, but it does, and I can show you a trick of kind of how to paint that back in too. Okay, so I'm going to duplicate my layer, create a layer mask, layer mask, and then Control or Command I on your keyboard to invert that layer. And then I'm going to paste in my overlay. I'm going to use my Alt key, or you could right click it. Now this is where you can play around with different blending modes. I could use this on soft light and it would look really pretty. I could use it on multiply for a darker backdrop. You can use overlay, but multiply, overlay, and soft light are typically the ones that are used the most, or that I use the most. Vivid light in some cases, usually on white backdrops. But you can always go through and play around with different ones. I'm gonna leave this on normal, and I'm gonna show you how I would do that. So obviously I would make it way darker. So I'm gonna go up to my adjustments, and I'm gonna create a curves layer. I'm gonna click on this right here to create a clipping mask so it only applies to my overlay, and I'm gonna drag that down. And then I'm also gonna click back on my overlay, add a hue saturation layer, and I'm gonna drag down that saturation. And now, obviously these flowers are very in focus. I don't want them to be, because I want them to appear that they are on the backdrop, not right behind her. So I'm going to go up to Filter and Blur, Gaussian Blur, and make sure that the background layer, or the overlay layer, is selected. And I want to add a significant amount for this one. And now I'm going to come back down to my mask here on my subject, and I'm going to zoom in, and I'm going to clean up the edges first. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to use my brush at 100% opacity. Same thing, white to brush on the overlay, black to brush off. And I would, again, do this around the entire image, but for tutorial's sake, I am not going to spend that much time doing that. I do see a little bit of banding because of the blur I added, so I'm actually going to go back up to my overlay. I'm going to go to Filter and Noise and add some noise. I don't know why, I use 1.53 and press OK. That way, that gets rid of that banding in there from creating the blur on there. Now, as you can see, if you go around, like, since we're using it on a different blending mode, her flyaways look okay. I do want to, obviously, use my black brush, get rid of the yellow that's in her hair. Pink kind of came on here a little bit. Now, I can show you a different way to, add in more hair in a minute. The bottom of the dress, if you're going to be leaving, like I'll brush it on here just to press RX, but I'm going to be brushing off a significant amount of the overlay on the bottom of the image. So I'm just going to do a quick job on that. Now flowers or something like this, I kind of just, you can zoom in and use a low opacity brush to kind of brush in little by little in areas that should be showing through, like in the gaps. What I end up doing a lot of the time is doing this and then just editing out some of the extra stuff. Like these leaves right here, I'll just get rid of them. 100% for around certain areas. You just don't want to use 100%, like come in here and just get rid of, like try to get rid of all the little areas because it's gonna look copy and pasted. It's better to do it little by little to make it look more realistic. So I would come in and just little by little, lots of clicks. Brushing in and off to get rid of, you can go up to 100% on like the very edges and then lower your opacity to kind of get closer to the florals here. And a lot of the times they're not even holding florals, so you won't have to deal with that. But I'm going to zoom back out, and then I'm going to stay on my mask here. I'm going to make my brush, oops, a little bit bigger here, and I'll leave it at 20%. That's good. My black brush, and I am going to come down here. So I want this to make it, I want to make it look like an actual backdrop, so I don't want to brush it off completely. But just little by little, I want to make it so it's not so bright. It wouldn't be so bright if it was an actual backdrop in the studio. The light was not coming from a significant way on the overlay, so I didn't have to worry about that. I didn't have to worry about that with this image so much either, but what light is coming obviously to her front, and the light was coming down this way onto this leaf. So I should have mentioned that, but always check your light too to make sure if it is something you need to worry about in the digital that you're obviously paying attention to that. So I would just go, and this helps too with matching the backdrop. Like if she's already gone a purple backdrop, so it's blending pretty nicely. If she was on a different colored backdrop, it may still look fine. But I would do my best to change the color of the backdrop first before I added an overlay that I'm wanting to leave on normal blending mode. Because if you're using a different, if you're going to use like multiply or soft light over a different color backdrop, you could always just make the overlay a black and white layer, and it would overlay onto your image, which I can show you that in a second too. But I would be pretty happy with this. I like my backdrops a little bit darker behind my subject, so it looks like they're actually standing on and in front of a backdrop. So I'm going to flatten my image real quick, and then I'm going to zoom in, and you can add that blur again if you want to. Just show you real quick, if you just create a new layer, do a soft brush at like size 1, and then hold down your Alt key to select some hair. I like to, if I need to add extra flyaways. 1 is actually a little bit small. I'm going to try 2. And just kind of do some loops in here of hair. Oh, it's only on 20%. That's why it's not showing. On the outside. This is obviously very ugly, but I would take my time a little bit more, you know, to add some flyaways like this, and then go up to your filter and blur tool, Gaussian blur, and blur those out a little bit. Not a lot, obviously. But that's a good way that you can just add, see, it looks like her hair is just a little bit more fuller and has a little bit more flyaways there. If there ever is a time that it looks like the hair is like really cut and paste, that's the way that I like to add the hair back in. Okay, so if you were to use this, I'm going to go, so this is before and after. This one was small too, before, after. So if I go back, just delete these. Or actually, I'm going to delete these. I'll just do it. So if I go back to this and I just make it black and white, do a black and white layer on it, flatten it, select all, copy. Say this was like blue or something, and you wanted to overlay this, you could do it a couple of different ways. You could, and I don't have her selected again. I'm just going to select her really quick. I'm not going to worry too much about fixing it. Paste, and then as you can see, like if I put it on, if I'm using it on overlay or soft light or multiply, there's no more color left to the backdrop because you already did it black and white. So that is another way that you can blend that more easily into the backdrop. Or you could always, if you're wanting different colors, you can add a hue saturation layer, and you could kind of play around with that if there's different colors you're wanting to use. These colors are pretty vibrant, so it wouldn't be very easy to do with this one, but you could play around with it. Like you could do a purple and a blue and mess around with the saturation and the hues to make that look pretty too. So they're really versatile. But yeah, that's how you blend. Add some extra flyaways in there if you have trouble copying and pasting. The most important part to me is to making sure that you brush the bottom of that overlay off some to make it look more realistic and make their dress blend into the bottom of the backdrop. If you have any questions, you can message me on Etsy. If you are a studio photographer, you can join my group on Facebook. I will link it in the description. I just realized that I did not go back and finish the flowers, but I would have just, after I flattened my image on the other one, I would have just came in and grabbed either my healing tool or my clone tool and kind of just got rid of those extra ones that I didn't want to brush on or brush off of.